With the PlayStation 5 Pro being real, it creates an interesting situation. Multiple Microsoft projects will be coming to the platform and will be supporting it. Major cases in point: Indiana Jones and Call of Duty. Will we see a situation where the quote unquote better console versions of Xbox games like these will actually end up on PlayStation? Microsoft may argue that if gamers want the best visuals / performance, then get the game on PC. But really, we have seen a situation like this before. Sure, the current Xbox Game Studios titles released on PlayStation, there are tiny visual differentiators, but moving forward, the discrepancy will, one assumes, be exponentially higher. Thoughts? I imagine it will be an interesting PR tightrope to navigate. This one from Dubak Nathan. Microsoft wants to turn Xbox into a more PC-like platform with support for different launches and everything. What's stopping them from allowing the console to run Windows games, thus making some of those PlayStation PC ports playable on the Xbox through Steam? The Magic Stick says, do you think Microsoft will respond to the PS5 Pro with its own bespoke Pro console generation, or do you think they will be content with second place in the teraflop power race? How many T-flops and what features do you think Microsoft will target if they do respond with more powerful hardware? So we're moving into this really interesting scenario now where PlayStation 5 Pro is coming along. Microsoft is going multi-platform. We know developers are going to be targeting the features of the PlayStation 5 Pro, almost certainly Microsoft Studios. Because they want to get the best experience out there to gamers. And if they've got that extra horsepower, well, they're going to benefit from it. At the same time, it is slightly weird that the best way to play Xbox games is going to be on a PlayStation console, which seems a bit weird. And then we have this messaging from Microsoft saying, well, we're going to open up Xbox to third-party stores. And they're talking about new hardware being the biggest generational leap ever. And, that kind of suggests that they're looking more towards PC as the future of Xbox. John, it is an interesting PR tightrope to navigate. And I'm curious what you think about all of this.
Yeah, wow, that is tricky. Well, so the Magic Sticks question first, where he's talking about the hardware power. And I think that the traditional console model, that's the line of thinking that he's applying there, where it's like, okay, we need to have the powerful console again. The tagline was Series X was the world's most powerful console, I believe. And, but technology marches on. I think it's fair to say that the traditional console model really isn't working for Xbox right now. And I think it would be a fool's errand for them to chase Sony down this pro hole again. I don't think it would move the needle at all, because that's not the problem. With the lack of power is not the problem with Xbox right now, right? I think you guys can agree with that, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, with this talk about a more PC-like platform, then, to me, that sounds more like what I've been saying for months now, this idea of leveraging what they already have, which is Windows, which is a very powerful thing that Sony and Nintendo really can't follow them on, right? Not in this sense where they fully embrace the positives and negatives of the PC, which includes opening the box up. And thus, that would indeed mean that PlayStation games could run on a theoretical Xbox PC style piece of hardware, right?
Yeah.
And that's just how it would be. But at that point, fundamentally, what the Xbox is a completely different thing. To me, that sounds something more like, say, the Surface line of products, rather than the traditional subsidized console, which is what PlayStation and
Yeah, it would still be called Xbox, though, obviously. It wouldn't be a Surface, but yeah, I get the point you're saying.
Right, instead of calling it Surface, it would be called Xbox, but it's that same idea where there's that's more what I'm thinking. But in the meantime, though, obviously, as the top question asked there, is like this creates a situation where in the console space, games that Microsoft will release on multiple platforms are likely to be better on the PlayStation 5 Pro versus any Xbox console. And I think that's just the reality of expanding to become essentially the world's biggest publisher, or one of them, I guess, which is also seems to be a direction they're moving in, right? With all
Yeah.
these acquisitions, they're just almost automatically like one of the world's biggest game publishers. So it would behoove them to release everywhere and not like, hold back their games specifically uh because of this old whatever's going on between Sony and Microsoft and all them, right? So it would
Yeah.
behoove them to target the hardware properly because they are ultimately selling a product to consumers that might own that piece of hardware. And there's no reason to handicap themselves there.
Oh,
And I think all of these things together, this big confluence of changes happening, it just shows that Microsoft's trying to change gears and do something a little different. And we don't yet know where it's going to go or where it'll end up, but it does kind of change the equations around what consoles were. And it's, you can't really think about it in the same way that we have in the past. So I feel like the whole Xbox versus PlayStation war is kind of coming to an end indefinitely, perhaps.
yeah. And, I definitely think that's the case. Oliver, thoughts?
Yeah, I think with some of the awkwardness around Microsoft potentially no longer having the most powerful console in the world, as they like to say, and possibly having these PS5 Pro versions that might actually exceed the quality of the Xbox versions, which you'd really expect if they were taking advantage of PS5 Pro at all. I think Microsoft is fine with it for two reasons, or at least okay with it for two reasons. It's a time-limited situation, number one, because we know that Microsoft is going to launch a new platform. It might come relatively soon, relative to the PlayStation 5. And when you look at the PS5 timeline, bringing that date forward allows them to presumably launch more powerful hardware into the market and actually reclaim that performance crown. Sort of like what they did with Xbox One X, where they were superseded by the PlayStation 4 Pro. And then, a little bit later, they were able to drop a console that was much more powerful than that system. The other reason is that they're less wedded to Xbox as a platform than I think they used to be, or at least they are still interested in Xbox as a platform in the broad sense, but less interested in specifically the Xbox Series console hardware as a means to grow that platform. And they're less wedded to exclusives. So I think those two factors make them okay with it. Regarding the PS5 Pro, I think developers will be making use of the hardware. I don't know if they'll be putting an incredible amount of effort into getting like advanced ray tracing features into their PS5 versions of their Xbox Series games, but I do think they'll be taking advantage of it. I think it'll be a little bit silly not to. And you're already shipping games on those systems. I don't think it's that big of a leap to say, okay, we're going to take advantage of the new PlayStation hardware's bespoke, power and features. I think it'd be a little bit silly not to. With the PC-like platform that the Xbox might be turned into and being able to run PlayStation exclusives, I think that'll probably be the case, but I kind of wonder if it might change Sony's behavior a little bit. Like, would they launch a game like Helldivers 2 day and date, for instance, if they knew that it would be on Xbox? Now, I think they would, but that could change their calculus for some games in particular. Maybe more single-player oriented games, maybe they delay them a bit. I don't think they change their PC strategy entirely, but it could factor into their plans a little bit. So yeah, I think that in general, it's not as big of a deal as it seems on the surface, because I think Microsoft is trying to de-emphasize the Xbox Series consoles as the kind of focus of their gaming efforts. I think they are trying to expand, and I think they are probably reasonably comfortable with being the second most powerful console on the market, so to speak, for a little while until they introduce their next generation of console hardware.
For me, it's all about timing. When are we going to get this new hardware? Because if you think about it, the FTC document leak had a very clear roadmap, 2028, which is pretty much when we expect, what the PlayStation 6 will be to arrive. That's the sort of time period that has been discussed throughout the whole Activision Blizzard King acquisition process. Current gen will last until 2028. If so, why is Microsoft talking about the biggest generational leap, in 2024? 4 years out. That just doesn't make sense. I suggest that there's probably going to be new consoles before that, which means that those FTC documents, as Microsoft has stated, are out of date. So the question is really, when is that new hardware going to come? Because it might just be that there's like an awkward year or something where the PS5 Pro is about a year, 18 months before, or maybe even 2 years, while this is an issue. And in the same time, Microsoft, you're quite right, they're de-emphasizing console. They want to be seen as the place where, Xbox is everywhere, right? I think the exact phrase was every screen is an Xbox. Yeah, so, that seems to be the case. Slightly embarrassing in the short term, but, it is what it is. They have to work with what they've got. And if they're going to go multi-platform, I don't think you can go in, just halfway. So I think that's the way things are going to pan out. There's going to have to be some deft marketing, though, and deft communication, which, to be frank, we haven't really seen so far. So, yeah, interesting times ahead in 2025, I'd say.